My friends and family have been mocking my fiancé for the past 3 years right in front of his face for not understanding our native language, but I just found out he's been fluent and understood them the entire time. Posted by you/understand 004. I, 24F, have been with Jimmy, 25M, for 3 years now. We first met in college, and we pretty much instantly hit it off. I'm full Korean while he's half Korean, even though he doesn't look like it at all. I was slightly disappointed when I found out that he didn't speak Korean. Pretty much everyone in my family speaks it, so more than anything, I thought it would be an issue, but it wasn't. He told me that he didn't know it but that he was studying it, which I thought was a nice gesture. He met my parents for the first time, and although they speak English, they prefer not to speak it much. My parents complained to me pretty much the entire night and even badmouthed him quite a bit because of his actions and lack of understanding. I didn't know it at the time, but I really defended him. Although most dinners at my parents' house involved them being fake nice to him, I tried my best to stick up for him. The first time my parents met his dad and his sister, they spoke very poorly of them. It was downright insulting. His dad had some pretty rude/weird behavior that was frowned upon. I would always talk with my parents on the phone while we lived on campus, often on speakerphone, and Jimmy would just kind of play dumb. Even with my friends, many of them were very rude to him after I told them he didn't understand it. He proposed to me at our favorite park 3 months ago in Korean, and I was so blown away by it. I thought it was the sweetest thing in the world. I cried with joy and happily accepted. I was so proud of him. Fast forward to last week, one of Jimmy's longtime friends had returned from his assignment overseas and met us for dinner, a really nice and respectable guy. He started talking and just full-on speaking in Korean to Jimmy, and I was taken aback. I said, "Oh, he doesn't know much, he's still learning." The guy scratched his head and said, "Jimmy is the guy who helped teach me Korean." "What are you talking about?" At first, I didn't know what to think. I was relieved and excited that Jimmy actually knew it, but the more I thought about it, the angrier I became. When I confronted him about why he didn't tell me sooner, he said that when his mother passed on his 18th birthday, he stopped speaking it altogether and started telling people he didn't understand it. He said it reminded him of her, which is understandable, but I don't know if I can accept something like that. When I told my parents, my dad was overjoyed, while my mother had a panicked look on her face as she recalled all the nasty things they had said about him and his family in front of him. My dad seemed to brush it off and fully understood Jimmy's reasoning for not speaking it anymore, but I don't know if I can be so forgiving. I feel like he's been secretly spying on me for the past 3 years. He lied to me about it. Even my friends, he treated everyone so kindly even though they all, at some point, talked bad about him. I don't know if he's noble and romantic or if he's just been using it to his advantage. Our relationship is otherwise perfect, and it seems like such a silly, minor detail to get upset over, but I don't know. Any outside perspective or input? Am I wrong for not letting this go so lightly? I think he should have told me way sooner. Commenter. I can understand being upset about being lied to, but I think what you're feeling is probably a lot of embarrassment about how your parents and friends acted. Sometimes, people who are biracial are used to not being accepted by one or both sides of their cultures. No matter what he does, to some people, Jimmy will never be Korean enough, even though that's part of who he is. You need to understand this, because if you have kids and they look a little like him, they might be treated like Jimmy one day too. Don't you wonder how your boyfriend was able to sit through all that abuse and not say anything? And why he would still be with you after all that? If anything, he has a right to be mad and judge you for having these kinds of people in your life. But maybe he is a calm enough person to know that when people say bad things about you, it shows you more about their character than yours. Or maybe, sadly, he has seen this kind of negative and judgmental behavior before from other relatives. I suspect that this might be the case. He is used to people judging him because he's been judged all his life, and he has learned to just brush it off. Talk it over and see if you can use this to come to a deeper understanding of each other. Maybe you can use it to become a stronger person who can stand up to your relatives and friends more, or at least be a better example. Perhaps you can gain a better understanding of his heart and character. This may put some distance between you, but you can also choose to let it draw you closer. Update 1 week later. First, I want to say that I admit I was totally wrong for trying to make this about me, and I realize my parents and friends, as well as myself, were all horrible people, which I agree with. I spoke with Jimmy the same day I posted the thread. I actually invited him over to my parents' place for dinner, but before that, I stopped by his parents' house to apologize to him, his dad, and his younger sister for everything because I felt so embarrassed and horrible. I apologized profusely to his dad, who did nothing but laugh. His dad was incredibly understanding and actually spoke Korean quite well himself. He even laughed, saying that he understands why my parents were the way they are. He told me a story about when he first met Jimmy's mom's parents in Korea and how much she had warned him about their behavior. He said she explained it to him, and he understood and respected where their concerns were coming from in terms of wanting to preserve their language and heritage. He shared that it started off rocky, but they quickly became impressed when he surprised them by speaking Korean fluently. He mentioned that his relationship with her parents is now stronger than ever, especially since she passed away, and he calls them twice a week just to chat. He said that when he heard I stood up for Jimmy, he was proud of me, even though he never said anything. Jimmy's sister, who is only 12, is super sweet and mature for her age. She said that when Jimmy started dating me, he also started teaching and talking to her in Korean again. The way she described it was really precious. His dad also teaches and talks to her, but she especially enjoys when Jimmy does it. As for Jimmy and me, we have been working together to resolve our communication issues and have spent a lot of time talking about our relationship. I admitted all my concerns, and he addressed them one by one, telling me exactly what I needed to hear. He apologized for keeping it from me for so long and assured me that he never did it maliciously. He just didn't want to associate Korean with the negativity that my parents and friends brought, which I find extremely understandable. He said he viewed the language as something pure that he and his mother often shared, and he didn't want to engage in it with my parents and friends. He admitted that it might sound silly, but I understood him on an emotional level. He told me about how close he and his mom were. We had never talked this in-depth about it before, and I cried like a little baby because I could see how much he loved and missed her. He mentioned that she always teased and warned him about the complications of marrying a full-blooded Korean when he was a teenager, and he didn't truly understand until he met my parents and friends. I even learned that Jimmy was born in Korea and lived there for 12 years. I feel like our relationship is stronger than ever. My doubts and worries are gone, and we're going to be a lot more open with each other. I'm ashamed I ever doubted him. He has been speaking Korean to me a lot more exclusively since I apologized to him. Most people probably won't understand, but he took me to visit his mother's grave, and it was one of the most touching moments I've ever had with him. I knelt beside him, listening as he told her about me, how he knew he had found the person he would make new memories with and how he would have to go back on a promise. I don't think I've ever cried so much in my life. I couldn't stop. We had dinner with my parents on Tuesday, and Jimmy spoke to them in Korean for the first time. My parents apologized for their past behavior. I think I didn't make it as clear as I should have in my original post, but after I defended him, they significantly cut back on their negative behavior. Jimmy apologized for the years of disappointment, teasing them for their original concerns. He told them a little about his mom, and when he mentioned his mother's maiden name, my father's eyes lit up. He didn't really go into detail, but he thinks he might have known her family. It made him extremely chatty and open. I've never seen my father so excited to talk to someone before in my life. Jimmy also mentioned that his family is planning a trip to Korea this summer, and he offered to pay for all of us to come with them. My parents haven't been back in years, and they happily accepted his offer. Jimmy is wonderful, really. I'm lucky to have him, and I'll never let him go. Thanks for the advice. Edit. Jimmy's apology to my parents for years of disappointment was made in a joking manner, not something sincere. It was meant as a joke, and everyone laughed about it, sort of like breaking the ice or easing the tension in the room. Commenter. This is all fine and good, but still, your parents and friends who talk shit are pretty bad. Luckily, your fiancé is actually Korean enough, and we don't need to belittle him to his face. We? Ops response. My parents and friends were very wrong to talk badly in Korean when they thought he couldn't understand. I realize the magnitude of their actions, and I've even told Jimmy that if he wanted us, or just himself, to go low or no contact with them, I would totally support and understand. I think my first post exaggerated the number of times they did this. After I defended him the first time, they cut back significantly. If Jimmy is willing and able to forgive them, then I'm just going to leave it at that. There's no point in me forcing an issue that he doesn't seem concerned about. He's a much better person than I am, for sure, because I would hold it against them. But Jimmy values family bonds quite highly, and he wants to have a relationship with my parents and wants me to keep a good relationship with them as well. As for my friends, I'll be cutting many of them out of my life.